This is Richard Wolff from Democracy at Work, responding to another Ask Prof. Wolff question from our Patreon community. This one comes from Brandon Desiderio, and he asks about converting capitalistically organized businesses, hierarchies, into democratic worker co-ops, where the workers are their own employer. One person, one vote. We've talked about that often. And I want to take this opportunity to respond to Brandon's question. Let me begin by doing it not so much as how we ought to think, but how it's actually already happening, and look at the motivations leading people to make these conversions and have been doing so for years. The story goes roughly like this. Small to medium businesses, 25 to say 300 or 400 employees. These businesses go on for decades, and then they reach the point where those who own them, those often who started and developed them over time, reach 65, 70, 75 years of age and wish to retire. They've given a lifetime of work. They've produced a successful, growing business. But their children are on to other lives and don't want this enterprise. If they're not corporations, then they have no one else to give it to. If they become a corporation, then they are leaving the legacy, if you like, of their enterprise in the hands of anonymous shareholders who will do Lord knows what with their enterprise. If they sell it to another enterprise, same problem. They don't want to do that. They don't want to put into jeopardy the lives, the incomes of the people they've hired over the years, of the community that's been a good host, that needs the business, needs the tax base, and so on. Guess what? Yeah, they decide their best course of action is to sell their enterprise to the workers as part of a conversion of the enterprise from a top-down, hierarchical, capitalist enterprise into a democratic worker co-op. And notice the logic. There's something better in the short and long run about doing that. That's in the minds of those elderly folks who make that decision with the businesses they've built up. But I think the argument is it's better for all of us. And that's an argument we can make and we can win. It goes like this. In capitalism, businesses are run by people who are in it for the profit. Profit is their bottom line. Profit is what they're in business for. Profit is how they're judged successful. Failure to generate profits is how they are judged unsuccessful. But the vast majority of people don't get profits. The vast majority of people involved in any enterprise are, number one, the employees, number two, the customers, and number three, the neighbors in the community where the enterprise is active. That's a large number of people, almost always much, much larger than those who stand to profit from the business, the owners and the shareholders. So democracy means that those who depend on the enterprise, that large number, have a stake in it, have a right to make decisions because they're affected by what this enterprise does, what it becomes. It is not democratic if a tiny minority, shareholders, owners, make the decisions and make them to benefit their income, i.e. profits, rather than the job security and income of the vast majority, the employees. So if you believe in democracy, if you believe in a certain notion of fairness and social justice, then capitalism isn't what you ought to be for. Something else is. And that's a very powerful argument we ought to make. Here's another one. Social change doesn't usually happen because folks decide not to continue in one particular arrangement and move to another, which, for example, they might think of as superior. No, history tells us that people tend to get stuck in the old ways. There's always a risk of going to something new, and you know the problems of what you got, and you don't know those to which you might switch. So when switches happen, when change happens, when one system gives way to another, it's usually the following reason. The old one, the one that's passing, is the one that is no longer tolerable. People make revolutionary changes when they can't stand the situation they're in. It's less the attractiveness of where they're going to go than it is the intolerability of what they've been stuck in. So our job is less to persuade people that a democratic worker co-op economy is better. We should do that, but that's not the crucial thing. Capitalism is in deep trouble these days, perhaps more than at any time in its history. Questioning and challenging capitalism is on the rise everywhere, here in the US too. The system is imploding. Its own contradictions, all the problems it's kicked down the road, they're all coming back and demanding resolution. What's beginning to happen is that people are finding the capitalist system's failures and difficulties and inequalities and instabilities intolerable. The racism, the billionaires looking down the street to people without a home, all of that, the failure to cope with COVID. These are extraordinary system breakdowns. Our job is simply to say, look, there is an alternative. We happen to think it's better, but whether it is or isn't, you're going to have to find something else to get away from something that is clearly busted, that isn't working for the majority of people who increasingly know it and see it. And here's a last point, Brandon, because you bring up the contradictions with China. Right now, the provocations by the United States of China are extraordinary. The difficulties, likewise. The hostilities, growing. The bitterness, alongside it. The Chinese do their things that we don't approve of, and vice versa. No one here is pure. No one here is the good guys and the bad guys. But the danger of another cold or hot war is obvious. Profit has driven most of human history in the last 3 centuries. It's looking really bad where it's driving this silly competition over who's going to be the biggest economy, who's going to be the fastest growing one. I think we'd be far better off if the United States and China, governed hopefully in both cases by worker co-op based enterprises, could see a common objective, and that is to develop the poorer majority parts of this planet, Asia, Africa, Latin America in particular, to overcome the legacy of difference between the rich and the poor, the North and the South, the center and the periphery, to overcome it on the grounds that we will all be safer and happier in a world not divided in the way that imperialism and colonialism reshaped the world. We have to reshape it again. And a post-capitalist system based on solidarity, on democracy, and on sharing is probably the best shot we have to get through this period of conflict between China and the United States. If comments like these, if responses to interesting questions like these strike you as valuable, then you understand why we try to reach out with them as far as we can. Help us. Share these videos with others. Expand and extend our reach. And if you can help with financial resources, please know we will be using them to extend and expand the reach of everything we do. Thank you.